So I'll just get started real quick. And we had just been doing a little bit of an introduction with Ellen. I am Christina Johansson. I run the St. Mary's Young Professionals Group. I've got a great board supporting me here. Our mission really is to provide opportunities for our young professionals in St. Mary's County to connect and network through social events, through community service events, and through professional development opportunities. And one of those, and it kind of combines the social aspect and our professional development here, is these rise and grinds that Connor has really organized for us. We've been doing them. I think is this our eighth? I think this is our seventh or our eighth. And we really were interested in making sure that the young professionals in the community, while we're all at home, while we all have a little bit of additional bandwidth to learn, and while we're a little bit forced captive, allow us to learn more about our community, to learn more about where we fit in, to learn about the resources available to us. And really that's the point of these rise and grinds, is to help people understand where they live, especially for people like we were talking about from a transplant perspective, who moved down here and who don't know where to go for information. I joked the other day about, I would never have thought to go to the tourism website. As a new person living here, I'm like, tourism's for tourists, right? No, it's not. So, I mean, I learn something new from these every single time. And I hope that is the same for everybody else in the audience. We get into some more challenging discussions depending on what the topic is. I'm really, really interested to hear what you have to say today, Ellen, because of some of our past participants have spoken about Leonardtown as, the burgeoning hub of St. Mary's County. It's where everybody wants to be like the center. And so it's really important to have your voice be heard as well. But before we get started, and typically, Ellen, I like to have our guests actually introduce themselves and give a little bit of their own backgrounds, because I can read a bio all day, and it means, it might not be right for this audience. It may not be tailored right. So I would rather have you tell our audience here what you want them to hear. But I have two announcements. The first, and I am sad that she's not on here, but Destiny got engaged. And so Destiny is one of our board members, and it is very exciting for us. And it is Connor's birthday tomorrow, because I did some Facebook stalking before this. So happy early birthday, Connor. And if you are not part of our newsletter distribution list, let me know. We did send out a pretty important newsletter this morning, addressing our position on current events and our support for the anti-racism movements going on. So please take a look through that. There are a bunch of resources in there for you. And I guess without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Ellen Lewis with the Leonardtown Business Association.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited. So a little bit kind of about me. I'm currently the president of the Leonardtown Business Association. I have a small business in Leonardtown. I own the yarn store, Crazy for You. And I've had that store on the square since 2004. Prior to that, as I was saying earlier to Christina, I did 20 years in defense. So I grew up in Northern Virginia, and I worked for a big defense contractor there. I got married and moved out to California. I worked for a small defense contractor. Was time to have a family, wanted to come back to the East Coast, and we landed with Pax River. My husband at the time, that was my husband. I'm divorced, long story, but whatever. So I got a job with a contractor. It was Eggy McAllister and Associates, and I worked for them for more than 10 years. And then decided that I wanted to do something really, really different. So opened the business in Leonardtown, and it's been great. So I've seen Leonardtown kind of evolve from 2004. Here we are at what year is it? 2020. So 16 years. You know, it's represented a huge amount of change in Leonardtown. When I started my business there, the building that I opened my business in was completely boarded up. A lot of the buildings in Leonardtown were boarded up at that time. And it was kind of depressing. You know, you saw the bypass go through. So as you see in so many small towns, there'll be a small vital town, and then the community around it will grow, and there'll be a bypass. I mean, a literal and a figurative kind of bypass in terms of people not thinking about that little town where they used to get their stuff that was so important to their life. You know, the whole community that exists around a small town is suddenly bypassed in favor of all of the amenities that people coming into the town are looking for. You know, one of the last things that I did when I was at Ewe McAllister was to write justifications on why. I don't know if any of you remember the BRAC process, base realignment and closure process. We were literally fighting for our lives to have the base remain in St. Mary's County. There was a lot of discussion about where the base should be. So, you know, my background, I'm a writer. So I was writing a lot of these justification statements about what made the base at St. Mary's, you know, at Pax River so special: deep water, clear airspace, all this stuff. So we were very lucky to have the base stay. And that brought in, so since we were staying, you had Warminster and all these other bases coming in. And what that did, and why it's important and why I bring it up, is that it brought in an entirely new demographic that St. Mary's had not seen before. So it was not just the people from Warminster who came in 1997, but it was then the people that came, the whole Navarre contingent, which was Crystal City. So Navarre was very much a cosmopolitan demographic. They from right outside of DC. And there was an expectation that there would be certain amenities. And that's when you saw the growth of the whole 235 corridor with all of your chain restaurants. And, you know, suddenly these restaurants that had not thought about St. Mary's County as a place to open were suddenly seeing that there was a demand for these kinds of services. That ties in to what happened in Leonardtown. There seemed to be, I guess, this kind of, this distancing. We work on the base, you don't. So I really have to credit not the LBA so much, but the leadership of Leonardtown. And Leonardtown, as you know, is the only incorporated city in St. Mary's County. So it has its own mayor, Mayor Dan Burris, who's wonderful. And before Dan Burris, it was Chip Norris. And Chip Norris had this vision for what Leonardtown was going to be. And I think it would have been really easy at the time to simply say, well, they're doing that at 235, let's do that here. But he had an understanding of the value of this small town. He spent a lot of his winter times at Cocoa Beach in Florida. He and his wife went down to Cocoa Beach. And it's interesting because Rex Agan, who was a leader in Ewe McAllister, also spent time at Cocoa Beach. So they had a friendship and a relationship, and there was this understanding of the importance of this small town. So Dan Burris, who is now the mayor, and Lachelle McKay and the leadership in Leonardtown they all share that vision. And the Leonardtown Business Association shares that vision of what makes it so important to have a Leonardtown. So why have a Leonardtown? What difference does it make? What does Leonardtown offer that is of value that you can't get on 235, right? So I think that's the question that a lot of people want to know. And you wouldn't think that it's so carefully tied or so closely tied to the base. This is going way beyond like an introduction. Is this what you wanted? is this you want to hear? Okay, good. So anyway, the base is really important to St. Mary's County. As you know, it accounts for 80% of our economic engine. So if we were to lose the base, the whole of St. Mary's County, as you know, would kind of go down the tubes. But as a secondary economic driver, the idea of tourism is huge. So Leonardtown and all of our waterfront as a tourist draw for people from DC is very important. But even more than that, having that kind of an urban happening, artistic, independent, unique space is very important for the kind of young professionals that the base is trying to recruit and retain. Christine and I were talking about it earlier, in that you get to St. Mary's County, you're young, you're not married, you don't have kids, or maybe you're young, you are married, and how do you get involved in the community? How do you find your place? Where do you find your people? It's nice to have people that are your friends from your work, but that gathering space that isn't just like any other place in the world up and down 95, or anywhere that isn't Ruby Tuesdays, Staples and PetSmart and whatever. And the key to it is that it has to be a unique space. And that's what Leonardtown is really, really focused on, is maintaining itself as a unique experience for everybody, but especially that it has that vibe that appeals to the young professional demographic. It's a little bit artsy, it's a little bit funky, the businesses are all independent. So you're not ever going to find another Fenwick Street bookstore. You're not going to find another Crazy for You. You're not going to find another health food store. It's not Mom's Organic Market. It's The Good Earth, and it's different. And when you have a business that is owned and operated independently, it's going to take on the flavor of its owner and the flavor of its community and the flavor of its customers. So you have this microcosm of small, independent people who are all pulling in the same direction to bring Leonardtown to be what it needs to be. We are super, super fortunate in Leonardtown that we do have the Leonardtown Business Association, but also, as I mentioned, the support of our elected leadership. Without Dan Burris and Lachelle and the town council and the director of economic development, without everybody having that shared vision of the importance of Leonardtown, it would not happen. I know that sounds very cheesy, but it's the truth.
No, it doesn't sound cheesy at all. And I think so I love that you've basically touched a little bit on most of the questions that I kind of have for you. And so I'd like to go a little bit deeper into some of them. But for the folks who are here who don't know, what is the actual role of the Leonardtown Business Association? Does it encompass all of the businesses in Leonardtown? Is it dues-based? Can you tell us a little bit more about the LBA?
So yeah, the LBA is dues-based. I mean, it's kind of like the Chamber of Commerce in a very small way, because we are Leonardtown. But yeah, it is a membership organization. You don't have to belong to the Leonardtown Business Association to benefit from the things that we do, but membership has certain privileges. And so we have monthly meetings, and the benefit of that is that if you're a small business owner, you don't necessarily know where to go to get information. But here at our meetings, which happen every month, or did happen every month, the second Friday of each month, you have representatives from the town, you have representatives from economic development, from tourism, from everywhere, and you can reach out to them at that moment and say, hey, person in charge of economic development, what do you think about this? Right? Otherwise, you'd have to run around and try to get an audience with them when you really couldn't. We do rely on our dues for the kinds of things that we are involved with. There are also sponsorships. So we have a lot of sponsorships from events that in which we collaborate with the town. It's kind of an accounting nightmare to separate the monies, for what is going to events and all of that. And I don't want to get too much into it. I guess the LBA was started to ensure that our business owners had a voice with the town. You don't get to vote on the elected leadership if you don't live within the incorporated district of Leonardtown, which is a fairly small area. So there were all of these people who had businesses in town and a tremendous vested interest in Leonardtown that were not able to vote on who was going to be making the decisions that really impacted them and their businesses. So that's how it was started, and it was probably started some 20 years ago, maybe more. And I think that had there not been this collaborative relationship between the business association and the town, it might have taken a very different turn. And it might have been that there was tension between the LBA and the town. And I've seen that in other organizations and in other areas. I had a branch of my business in La Plata, not to name names or whatever, but I had a branch of my business in La Plata for 7 years. And I can tell you that it was an extremely different experience. The La Plata Business Association and their relationship with the town and the elected officials was not what it is in Leonardtown. So we're very, very lucky, very lucky.
No, it sounds like it. And I did have an opportunity, gosh, probably 3 years ago now, I think, to come speak with the LBA at one of the monthly meetings, just as hey, here, we're the young professionals group, back when we were still a baby little group. So when you talk about the vision for Leonardtown, I know there was a big planning session probably a year and a half ago now at this point. I think Andrew was there, Destiny was there. It was this big compilation of folks, and there was a discussion on, okay, well, what is the future of Leonardtown? What do we want Leonardtown to look like? What values do we want it to evoke, right? How are we going to bring young professionals here? How are we going to keep them here? So I know there was an outbrief. I don't know how well socialized that ended up being with the general public, but could you talk to us a little bit about kind of the 5-year, 10-year plan for Leonardtown, and then where you see young professionals playing a role?
So the last time that there was a comprehensive vision plan, I think, was 2010. Anyway, Lachelle McKay would be the one to tell you about that. But let me just say that it was a long time ago, and Leonardtown was a very different place when that was done. So we are actually coming up on the next economic visioning session. And again, that is Lachelle's deal, absolutely. But the planning session that you're mentioning was a branding effort. And it was huge to kind of figure out what it was that Leonardtown wanted to be and do going forward. I think kind of more of just maintaining the idea. So if you have a vision plan, then it's easy to say this fits with that and this doesn't. So if you have a vision and you understand where you're going, then you can say yes to this initiative and maybe not so much to that other initiative. So I think the goal is to continue to be a small, welcoming, walkable town with a lot of activities. And, again, the independent, it has to look really, really different from any place else. It has to be unusual and special so that you go there and you feel like, wow, I've had an experience here. It's it's not like going anyplace else. If you travel, you know that there are certain places that you go that feel welcoming. You know, you go like in Europe, where is the place you want to go? You know, and when you think of that, you immediately think the place with the, you know, with the decorative lighting and the hanging baskets and the all of the businesses and the coffee shops and the restaurants and all of the cute little stores, right? You know what I'm saying? You know where that is. You don't necessarily know where it is, but you know what it is that you're looking for. You're looking for that place that gives you the flavor of that town, that has a critical mass of businesses that are fun to visit, that they have art and they have people and they are diverse, you know, that they welcome that kind of diversity. I think that's super important. Especially now that
So I guess a question for you then is how, like, so we're talking in really strategic, big, you know, bigger terms. From a tactical standpoint, how is the LBA helping to help Leonardtown reach that critical mass of businesses? And how is LBA helping to encourage young professionals to actually create their businesses there? Like what, just talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's hard because I look out at who your young professionals are, and I'm not sure that most of you are doing the kinds of entrepreneurial efforts that would fit into Leonardtown. I would suspect that most of you are working on the base or with the base or in some capacity. Is that an unfair?
So I would say that there are likely a lot of people who are doing that as a function of having to have a job. But I see that there are a lot of entrepreneurs in our group that are not base focused. I mean, Connor or Andrew or Mary, feel free to jump in here, but I don't know that that is necessarily a completely accurate statement. I think if we were allowed a space, if it was very clear that we would have support for an entrepreneurial effort, if it was clear that, you know, there was like if we understood better the interactions between tourism, like LBA, economic development, and we understood the resources and some of that risk associated with entrepreneurship and business ownership, especially in a pretty captive environment here, if we understood how to minimize those risks, I think you would see some burgeoning entrepreneurs who would be interested in having storefronts in places like Leonardtown.
I would so love that. I would love that more than you can know. So my thing with Leonardtown Business Association is that we are that. We are your big brothers and your big sisters because we've been doing this for however many years, and we're here to help you. You know, when Spice Studio came on board, I don't know if you know Nicole McGee, incredible young woman, and she had a vision, and she'd been doing her bar studio kind of in her basement. She came to me and she said, you know, what do you think? What do you know? And I kind of took her under my wing and said, you know, here are some things to think about. Here are some ways that you can collaborate. And I think that's one of the most important roles of Leonardtown Business Association, is to provide that kind of support and access to a network of people who have done what you want to do, and to help you find your way. I'm super excited about Shepherd's Oldfield. I talked to Jerry LaRue, and what I said to her was, I see Shepherd's Oldfield kind of as a business incubator space, in the way that economic development has their technical business incubator space over by the airport. Jerry's space is a place where if you have an idea for a thing you want to do or something you want to sell or a business you want to have, that is a place where you can go for very low cost and rent a small space, and you can kind of float your business model out on that, and see how it goes. One of the things that's really nice with the LBA is that you have access to collaborative advertising. So if you were to go out, strike out on your own and have to advertise in all the channels that are available to you, it would be cost prohibitive. But since we have so many people who are together, we can take out a full page spread in a major publication and say, Leonardtown welcomes you, and list all of the businesses for a lot less money than it would be if Crazy for You wanted to reach out to that same audience, that same demographic. So I would love to have kind of another roundtable with people who are interested in that, talk to them about what their business idea is and how we can help them establish where might be a good space for them, what would be a good fit.
So that was actually kind of where I was going to go next, right? And again, this is my perception, right? And I am not representative of all of the opinions here, but I feel like there is a pretty distinct gap right now between what Leonardtown itself wants to be and has this vision of being, and what it is. And I think sometimes that gap is minimized by saying, hey, we're doing all of these things. But all of these things, it doesn't reach the community as much. Like it took me, I ended up having to be connected with Andrew and Destiny to even find out about the branding thing. I think I was the only young person in the crowd. And it's I will just say that it's a little bit disheartening sometimes when, you walk into town and you want it to be like, I want it to be this arts community. I want it to be, this burgeoning, exciting environment where it's super unique. It's like, you talk about the places you love. I love St. Michael's. That's my local drivable, like, if I need to like get out of Dodge, that I love going there just because of the vibe, right? So I want to walk into Leonardtown and have that vibe. Right now is weird. I get it. But it is sometimes challenging when there is not an event going on, right? Like when there's not the car show, when there's not like the random tractor parade or any of those things. It is a little bit more challenging to get that vibe. And I don't know necessarily how the town or how LBA is addressing that gap from a day-to-day perspective, right? I know the vision and I get it. So how are you guys tactically trying to make that happen?
Right. Okay. So that is exactly what the whole branding initiative was intended to do. So that organization is all about taking towns like the organization that the town hired. So it's all about taking towns like Leonardtown and making them more like St. Michael's or Berlin or all the other places that you're thinking about. So we're like knee deep in that process right now. I get what you're saying. Our vision is not where we are. Okay. I know that. You walk into Leonardtown, it does not look or feel like we want it to. Okay. I get it. So it's about some of the things that are happening right now, and some of them are really, really small things that make a big difference, but they're in the works. Like if you've been in town lately, you might not notice that all of the low planted boxwoods around the square that we thought were, really great and enclosing the square were actually prohibiting kind of the movement between the squares, between the square and the street. Those beautiful crepe myrtles that grow up and get pruned and have these gorgeous flowers. Well, they're dead smack on the eye line between the, the driving and the pedestrian traffic and my store sign. So, right? So those came down. So you're probably not seeing the little tiny changes that happen, but they are happening. The idea that it's just really hot in the summertime when people need to be walking around in Leonardtown. It's just flipping hot down there, okay? So what we need are great big mature shade trees that come up and form this kind of canopy over the street so that it is a walkable place, so that you can sit down there and not feel like you're sitting out in the middle of a farm. So that's happening, but shade trees take time. So,
No,
but
yeah, I know, I completely understand. And I did find that really interesting out of that session on talking about, okay, how can we make this more walkable? How can we make this so people actually come and hang out
right.
instead of coming in for dinner and then leaving? Because, a lot of it is, okay, if people are coming in after work and the shops are closed, the only thing that's open really are the restaurants. And so how do you kind of migrate that? And there have been some really interesting pieces on this chat. I don't know, Ellen, if you are looking at the Zoom chat at all, but I appreciate everybody chiming in. So Matt Hayes had a good point that he can see that the vibe is changing, and makes a good point too that if you just spend some time there, you figure it out, and you figure out the things that you like, and the little the little groups and the little spaces to hang out. So I think that that's a really good point as well.
So First Friday is an initiative that's exclusively the LBA's deal. Okay. So the idea is that, if you want to experience that sort of it's happening, right? It's happening here. It happens at Harris, right? That First Friday is that time when that does happen. So there's like a band on the square, and all of the shops are open till 8 o'clock, and there's stuff going on. And, the idea is that people are moving from business to business and walking around and enjoying stuff and blah, blah, blah. That is kind of an idea of where we're going, so that it looks like that all the time. I will tell you that it is disheartening for the businesses when they are open late and there's a band on the square and people are standing on the square and looking at the band, right? And there isn't this kind of walking around from shop to shop. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's hard to know what impact an action is going to take. We've worked so hard with the town and with our sponsors to have these great bands in town. Come to find out, on the nights that there's a band, we're thinking, wow, the Rex is killing it on the night there's a band. It's awesome. They must have so much business. It kills their business. They have a drop in business on the nights that there's a band on the square. And it's like, that doesn't make sense. So how do we, as a team, as a collaborative organization, the LBA and the town and, tourism and all of it, economic development, how do we find a way to create events that benefit the town, benefit the community, benefit the businesses, create that vibe, all at once?
No, absolutely. I completely can see that. I have one more question, and then we're going to kind of open it up to other folks. I know Tommy's got a good question in there too, in the chat. But because this is a young professionals call, and because we are an extremely vested community in making sure that Leonardtown is a hip place, it does have that vibe, because we all want that. I do not want to drive to DC and not be able to have more than like a glass of wine and then come home and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I do not want to have to do that all the time. So we have a really vested interest in the success of Leonardtown. But I know I personally, even in the role of being, our YP lead right now, right? I have not really seen opportunities to be involved in some of that visioning other than because I happened to know people who happened to be involved. Is there an opportunity to either bring a cadre of young professionals into some of those planning sessions, or um, work with you guys to get kind of a little bit of a working group together based on some of the stuff that economic development has done with their young professional study a couple months ago, and your branding thing and all of this stuff? Is there a way to kind of get the YP voice heard a little bit more in some of this visioning?
I would love that. I would love that so much. First of all, I'd like to offer your organization a reciprocal membership in the LBA. So I would love to have you come to all of our meetings, and I would be happy to come to any and all of your meetings, kind of so that we open that dialogue, so that you can hear what's happening from our perspective. And I would love to hear what's happening from your perspective. I would also love to know how we can reach your demographic better. I have kids your age. So, and I'll tell you what, they were born here and they all live elsewhere. So how do we reach you? What is it that you're really looking for? What is going to bring you into town? And when is a good time for you to come? We want to serve you. I mean, you're our prime target demographic. Each and every business in Leonardtown, I can tell you, Christina Johansson is our target demographic. So if we're not serving you, shame on us. How do we do that? How do we reach you? What news media do you consume? Where do you get your information? Where do you find out about things? How do we put our information out to you? Because that's what we need to be doing.
Well, and that's part of why these rise and grinds have been so great. So first of all, thank you. I would love to take you up on integrating more with the LBA, and I think that would just be mutually beneficial. But really, honestly, we have tried different things over the last couple of years, from reaching our own demographic. Right, it is challenging. This whole community is so word of mouth. And people get into their little spheres, and if you're not in the spheres don't overlap. It was like what I was saying, even with BJ, right? So it was shocking to me that we do almost all of the same things, we know all of the same people, and we hadn't had an opportunity to just connect, or to get his information out through our channels and our information out through his channels. The fact that it has taken this long is really surprising. And so what we have found is that what our young professionals group, what our benefit is being able to be that conduit, right? Our newsletter, our Facebook account, those things are like, we've got, like I was saying, we have 700 followers at this point, of people generally in our demographic who, Facebook is challenging with algorithms and managing visibility, right? That's a whole different story, but we do have a much bigger reach now. So I would like to put out that if LBA, or if Leonardtown as a town in general, is doing something, if they are hosting an event, if they are opening up a new place and there's a ribbon cutting, or if there's an opportunity for our voices to be heard, I would love to put that information out to our folks. And I think it just is going to take a little bit more of a concerted effort on our board's part to make sure that we are touching the right hubs in the rest of the county. So we are happy to be that information conduit for you.
That would be great. So one thing that the LBA recently did was to establish a visitor-focused website, visit leonardtownmd.com. Previously, the Leonardtown website, which is managed by the government, has a lot of information in there for the residents. It doesn't feel very, hey, come visit Leonardtown, here's what's going on, right? This is where you pay your water bill, which is fine. And they need that kind of a website for that function. But there was no website that said, hey, here are all the cool things that are happening in Leonardtown. Here are all the businesses. Here are some places to go, some things to do. So that's definitely an important resource. It's a new website, and as you know, new websites take a while to get discovered. As far as Facebook, we have a Facebook account, Leonardtown Business Association, an unfortunate, not very customer-focused name, but we also have a Facebook account called Visit Leonardtown MD, which is trying to grow that. But regarding the whole Facebook and managing that, I have found for my business that a Facebook group is a much more powerful way to access your target market than simply a Facebook page. So Facebook has its algorithms, as you say, that will limit who is going to see your posts and whatnot. But the Facebook group is people who have actively opted in to hear what you have to say. And that's super important. So I'm going to see if I can't get a Facebook group. I mean, there's a lot of really cool Facebook groups, like Southern Maryland is Hungry, and which is all about the restaurants, and Southern Maryland is open for business. So we're trying to do something like that. Part of the problem is that the LBA is an entirely volunteer organization. I'm the president, and I have a full-time business to run. So, and Jen Stotler, who's the vice president, has a full-time job. She does an amazing job posting to Facebook, managing our Facebook group, and all of this stuff. To be honest, we are looking for someone to serve as secretary who would handle a lot of those kinds of sending out the constant contact and reaching out in letters and all of the kinds of things that you described, the way to reach out. That's a really important role. And when our secretary moved away, that's been a big hole in our organization that has not been filled. So we're actively looking for someone who would be interested in doing that. Would be happy to have you consider it.
Right?
No plug there, no pressure.
No,
what I'm saying though, it's tough to get it all out there, but these kinds of meetings I think are crucial. And going forward, if we do share this, would love to collaborate. Love to.
Great. So we have about 15 minutes left, and I wanted to just scroll through some of these chat comments and then open it up to questions from everybody, because we do have a little bit of a different audience today, which is very exciting.
Okay. I haven't looked at the chat. Shall I bring those up?
Yeah, that would be great. So about 2/3 the way down, Tommy is online and wanted to ask how you guys in Leonardtown have been able to avoid some of the pettiness that exists in other communities between businesses and politicians.
It's a really good point. I'm glad that you validated my experience there. I think we're just really lucky to have this shared vision. I'm not sure that how that came about in Leonardtown, but the three-legged stool of the business community, the elected officials, and the wider community all working together to create that. So I think having a compelling vision that people can buy into has allowed everyone to understand the benefit of doing Leonardtown this way. It would be super easy for Dan, our mayor, and Lachelle, our manager, to say, yeah, we could get a lot of money if we put a great big whatever in town, because they have a big, they would pay a lot of taxes. But they've opted not to do that, which is wonderful. So I guess the pettiness we don't have, because there is this open communication. If there are differences of opinion, I would think that we would be able to talk about it and say, here's, from our perspective, here's what's happening. Like when we did find out that the events were crushing the restaurant and bar business, we went to them and we said, hey, here's what's happening. What can we do about this? And approaching everything with a we could if attitude, not pointing fingers and saying, well, you guys. Some of it has just been hard work, I think, from the standpoint of communication. And I think some of it is just really good luck on having a collaborative set of people in those roles.
Well, that's great. And a great comment from Matt, and I wholeheartedly agree with this, is that having a space to just go, this is more of a comment, I guess, than anything, but having a space to go where you aren't forced to spend money is also really important too. I mean, like I know when I was back in school, it would be great to be able to just go sit somewhere that isn't my house, or sit somewhere that isn't the school, or somewhere that, right, where I don't have to go buy a coffee or have lunch or whatever to be able to utilize that space. So Matt, I think that's a great point. Are you guys doing anything to kind of address that?
Oh, absolutely. I think if you come to the square, you'll see, again, I mentioned that those low hedges around the square have been taken away to kind of open that space up. Lachelle has put in Adirondack chairs, and they're working now to get more tables in that space. And until the big shade trees go in, there's a lot of talk about those kind of shade canopies. If you look even at, like right in front of my business, there was a bench that ridiculous. It was facing the street. and the people who came in and did kind of the evaluation of the town, they were like, okay, what's the point of that? So, I mean, Lachelle was just amazing, and Mayor Burris just amazing in their quick response to immediately address all of the kinds of low-hanging fruit. So now instead of a bench that faces the street, we have two benches that face each other. So people can go and sit. Go figure, Right now with the carryout and the restaurants doing carryout, there's space there for people to go and sit on the green and have their carryout. You don't have to have bought anything. You can go and sit there and enjoy the town. Jeannie's Park, where there's, where I'm talking about, next to the Duke building, to have that little space where there are benches and just an awareness that people want to come into town and they want to take ownership of this space. I mean, we want that. We all want that. And no, I don't think that every time you come into town, you have to buy something. I mean, my business, again, is a yarn store, right? So we sell yarn, but we also have community. So people come in and, they work on their project there. They don't have to buy something every time. There's this continual, I call it service after the sale. So that's what Leonardtown is really trying to do. You do consider this your town. This is where you go when you want to get a cup of coffee. This is where you go when you want to go out to dinner. This is also where you go when you just want to hang out. You want to be. And I think that's the reason that they play the controversial music in the square. Some people love it. Some people loathe it. All right. But the idea is that when you come into the square, there's music. It's a place where you can be. So I hope that you feel welcome to come in there. And I hope that the shade trees grow really fast.
There are some things that just come with time, Ellen.
It takes time.
You can't make them go any faster. So Mary made a good point too, that there is a lot of other new stuff going on that we haven't talked about, like the pier down at the wharf. So I think some of those infrastructure pieces are actually really helpful too.
And I think, again, part of the brand process was to design, they're working to implement a big arch point on Washington Street, wharf entrance. So people know that, hey, there's water down there. right? Huge amount of money went into slips so that if you are in St. George's Island, you can approach Leonardtown by boat, dock your boat there, and come on into town. The tough nut to crack on that really is that big hill. It's a big hill. So getting from the boats up to town is hard. So we need, probably need, and the town is working on it. I get it. We need a restaurant of some sort down there, and then shops on the way so that people don't feel like they have to hike from here to get someplace, that they're strolling along and that there are things to do along that way. But that's a continual
connecting
problem.
the point. Yeah, I mean, it's connecting those 2 points instead of having 2 disparate points in Leonardtown to focus on. Yeah.
Right.
But
they have a great playground down there, and if you there's parking. I mean, where else can you go that there's so much free parking? Free and accessible parking.
I will take whatever free parking I can get. So I do want to open it up because I think we're going to end up running a little bit long today, because I'm really interested in hearing from you all. And I think for those of you who have the suggestions on the chat, when I post the video for this, I'm also going to be asking kind of a question at the end that says, you know, hey, what do you envision for Leonardtown? Or what, if you weren't on the call or whatever, what do you want Ellen to know you want in Leonardtown? I would really appreciate if you would take your comments from here and make sure that you post that on our post up on Facebook, just so that we have them as a compendium, so Ellen has it to look at, and so it's just somewhere that's more easily accessible and for her and for Leonardtown to go and take a look at.
Can I real quick address Aaron Ramos's comment? Yeah, absolutely. That whole alley network in Fredericksburg is huge, and I want you to know that that's part of the plan in the whole branding plan. Andrew posted a link to that. Please, please, please take a look at that plan, because the alley network, they're calling it L-Town Alley, and it's over there behind where New View Fiber is and Sweet Bay. So this concept of opening up those alleyway networks, that's in the works, that's coming. And yeah, it's totally cool, it's totally funky, and that's what we have planned. It's so sad that the coronavirus sort of hit right as we were gaining traction with implementing this plan. But we are working on that. The town is definitely looking at those alley spaces. There's a beautiful rendering of that available on the website. So please, please, please take a look at that. I think that you'll feel heartened to know all the stuff that's coming. Don't give up.
Well, and it just does bring up a really good point that, you know, we weren't aware of that. Right. So how do we become more aware of these plans and things like that?
Right. So, and that's on us.
So Connor just had a quick question about how LBA is supporting its members during the pandemic, and not just your members, but the community at large, right? Because that's kind of the, you know, how we have to operate
right.
in society. Yeah.
So first of all, LBA dues are due in March, and this year we waived dues altogether. So there are no dues for LBA members for 2020, 2021. We've been having regular support in information go out on our members only Facebook group. I've been doing some Facebook Lives talking to our members about marketing concepts and how they can reach out to their customers during the pandemic. I've offered to do training with them on how to do Facebook Lives, talking to them about ways in which they can market that are different from having that interaction in the shop. So we've been having Zoom calls rather than having our monthly meeting. We've been having Zoom calls with representatives from Economic Development and the Small Business Development Center on the PPP loans and the other disaster recovery loans and how they can access that and what to do with that, and just putting them in touch with people and resources who can help them during this time. So that's what we've been doing for our members.
Great. Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go around. I haven't found a great way to actually make sure that everybody's questions are answered. So I'm just going to go around real quick. So Andrew, do you have any questions for Ellen today?
No questions, but I've been part of the, at least working with the LBA for how many years now? 7 maybe, since I started in tourism. And that's why I was really happy to have Ellen on, because I really wanted to, when I first started, even to now, it's completely different. Obviously a lot of ways to go, but everyone's just been really excited on the way Leonardtown's moving, especially with the plan. So, and I think to Christina's point, getting it out there has always been my thing, from tourism to now, how do we connect with our group? And it is hard because of the bubble, but I think now with this connection, this will really help. So, and just people didn't even know the LBA existed. So that's something I wanted to really make happen. So no questions, but I just want to make that comment.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate it. Matt Scassero, did you have anything?
Just a recognition that I moved here in 2004. Also, I live 5 miles south of the town, down Medley's Neck. And I've seen a dramatic difference from the inward focus that it was when I moved here to now more of an outward focus. Has really been dramatic. And I'd like to see that continue, and more inclusive focus, more inclusive of the different populations you really want to draw there. So you're heading in the right direction. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Matt. I live off Medley's Neck Road also.
It's always a small world. Bonnie, did you have anything for today?
No, I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I think that the St. Mary's Arts Council does a great job of getting the word out about so much of what's happening in Leonardtown. And I think getting that message out on a broader basis would be even more helpful, because I'm constantly sharing it with other people who aren't familiar with it, and it's just a really good resource. And it's broad, it encompasses a lot of activities.
It does, and they're really active too on social media, which I appreciate. The word gets out a little faster, I think.
Right, but we still have part of our demographic that's not looking at social media, so sharing it in old-fashioned emails is sometimes necessary.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a newsletter too. Erin?
I don't have any questions, but I would comment on what Matt said about Leonardtown being inward focused. My parents moved down here in 2004, and every time I came down to visit, we'd go to Solomon's or we'd go to DC if we wanted to do something. And since I've moved down here, it's been about 4.5 years. That's not the case so much anymore. When my friends and I go out, we're usually in Leonardtown, and it's just such a big difference from 15 years ago, and it's great to see.
Thank you.
Especially with Shepherd's Oldfield, I know I find myself over there, and the amount of pizza that I consume is pretty shocking. Christina, thanks for joining us today.
No problem. This is actually really cool, because this is why I feel like Facebook and social media is so great, because I literally found this on Facebook like 2 minutes before I clicked on. So I apologize for being late, but I'm here and that's what matters. So, but I do have one question. As far as brand awareness, has the LBA actually started to think about integrating Facebook marketing? I know it's a lot, but if you actually utilize that tool, it is amazing, because you can get your brand, and that's for everybody on here, because I use it and it works. You want to get brand awareness, product engagement, utilize those Facebooks and Instagram apps and marketing tools, because they work. So I would say my only question would be, have you guys looked into that? But I also just want to say, I feel like this is great. This is the first town that I've lived in that I actually see the town actually trying to make an impact and trying to get people involved and create a safe space and a community for people to actually enjoy themselves in the town. So I feel like we're on the right track for sure. So I say just look into Facebook marketing. That's everybody. I'm telling you, y'all, it works. It works. It works. It works. The proof's in the pudding. So that's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Christina. Yeah, Jen Stotler, who has done a lot of the boosting of posts, there are probably really great ways that we probably could do it better. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Facebook marketing does work. I'm glad that you like Leonardtown. I'm glad that you're seeing it, you know, grow and be more outward focused. We have a wonderful, I say we but the town has a wonderful public affairs and events coordinator, Brandy Blackstone, who's working really hard on.
I love Brandy. I love her.
I love Brandy too.
I love
She's
her so
the best.
much.
Okay, so we work really closely together to make sure that there are ways for people to interact with and enjoy Leonardtown, even though they can't come into the square. So she's literally working her fanny off to do that and to collaborate with the business owners. So check out, and she's actually the designer and she runs our website. She's an amazing, talented person. So definitely look at the website and definitely look at some of the initiatives that she has out there for ways to get into Leonardtown and our businesses and to do during the pandemic. So yeah, thank you so much. Great comment.
Awesome, thanks. Over to you, Rachel.
Hey there. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate being included in these conversations. It's great stimulation of my brain in the morning at 8 a.m. My sister actually lives right off of Leonardtown Square, and so Leonardtown Square has always been like a part of me. I love all of the businesses down there. I love supporting them and cannot wait for more shops to open along the water.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Over to you, Mary.
I don't really have any questions, but yeah, I love Leonardtown. I was down there yesterday and I saw the lawn chairs set up on the square and it was really nice. And even with everything like kind of halfway closed down, it still looked like everybody was enjoying themselves and walking around. So I definitely miss it and I'm ready for it to be back open. So
I think that makes all of us. I've got an account for Finer Sweets Bakery, and I don't know what your first name is. But if you have any comments, just feel free to let us know. Tommy, did you have anything else?
Thank you for being honest, pretty transparent conversation. The only thing I wanted to ask is if anyone from the Leonardtown Business Council is interested. There are a group of two young gentlemen that are building a battle bot, which is a robot that fights other robots on TV. And they're looking for a Maryland robot that looks like a crab to be built. And if anyone from the Leonardtown business community is interested in being a sponsor, tell them to reach out. I know that's a weird question, but I figured I'd ask.
A Maryland crab robot. All right. I mean, I'm in. Can it like have pinchers?
You know, actually, I think that's a really, really incredible opportunity. I mean, it's this kind of disparate stuff that really sparks the most creative stuff. So you have this hugely high-tech organization at the base, and all of the drones and the AI, and as I said, the business incubator down by the base, and then you have the arts piece and the creativity from, as Bonnie mentioned, the Arts Council. So that's a way that they could come together. So let me think about that. I love that idea.
Yeah, and Tommy, if you have more information on that, please send it my way and I'll get it to Ellen and see how I can help you out with that. Thank you. Matt Hayes, last but not least.
Sorry, it took me a moment to find the mute button there. I don't know if I have any questions today. I really do enjoy Leonardtown. I live just outside of the town, and I think a lot about walkable communities and how having a walkable area kind of impacts the region. And it's really the only walkable community that we have locally. And, you know, I'm happy to see it really kind of coming back to that. You know, it used to be this big center of action in the county back when my parents were growing up. And then the base just like annihilated it by routing everything around it. And now our generation is kind of coming back out of the suburbs and looking for somewhere to be and meet and mingle and get to know people. And it's standing out as becoming that place again. So.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. They're working hard.
Well, listen, I really appreciate everybody being on the call today, especially some of our new folks. It's very exciting to see you on here. And Ellen, I really want to thank you for taking the time. I try not to normally run over our hour limit, but I've learned that it's really great to hear everybody's voice. So trying to kind of get more engagement towards this end piece. Plus, then I'm not talking as much. But I appreciate you taking the time and all of the resources that you've given us. And I'm looking forward to kind of having our organizations work together a little bit more to get more information out and to drive people a little bit more into that social aspect that you all are trying to bring into Leonardtown. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And I'm so happy to hear what what people in your demographic think. And I'm anxious to know more about what you want. Again, it's our business to serve you, and we need to know how to do that best. So I'm looking forward also to an interaction between our organizations. I will put your email, if you want to send me your email, I will put you on the invitation for our next LBA Zoom call. And we can chat offline also. So I would love that very much.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate it. And tune in next week, same time, kind of same place, I guess, different URL, whatever, for our discussion with the Southern Maryland Agricultural Development Commission for SMYP. Do you have that right, Connor? Right.
I think so. Yeah.
All right. So we'll be talking with them next week, and I look forward to seeing you all then.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.